Hey guys, glad to be back with you here on What the Football. Suzy and Amy, of course, and they say that timing is everything. And just as we sit down in these very chairs awaiting Stephen A. Smith, Antonio Pierce is fired as head coach of the Raiders, a 9-17 record since taking over as interim coach last season and being named the full-time head coach a year ago. Amy, what are your thoughts right off the bat?
Couple thoughts. The team played hard for Antonio all season long. Even as the losses were adding up, the team never, ever quit on him. So I thought that this would be a tough decision, a decision into which a lot of thought would go. We've all heard that Brady is weighing in, and I think that's terrific. Brady is a part owner of the team now. They'd be silly not to listen to him. But a name we don't hear enough, in my view, Suzy, is Richard Seymour. Because just as Brady purchased an equity interest in the team, so too did Richard. And my experience working with Richard is he is just extraordinarily smart and wise, and they should listen to Richard as well. So hopefully they'll listen to Tom, they'll listen to Richard. Not necessarily that they'll be decision makers, but give them input.
What do you think this says about Pierce and his position with this team, though, to have an owner one and done, 1.5, I would say? What do you think this says about where Mark Davis was with him and where they might go from here?
Well, what we don't know yet is if or to what extent input from Tom or Richard or others was factored into Mark's decision, or if he made the decision on his own. My hunch is that he solicited input from people. He's very good at doing that. He listens to people he trusts. Who knows? Maybe Jim Gray made the decision.
It's so funny. I was going to just ping you a little bit on that and just poke you a little bit on that, thinking, I wonder if Jim is putting on his GM shoes for this one.
Well, he certainly may have had input. He's had input on quite a few things in that organization. But as I said, you've got men who know the game. You've got Tom, who can now give you input. You've got Richard. And again, we don't hear Richard's name enough, and that may be by Richard's choice, because Richard, he's just a tremendous man. I know I would be soliciting his input, but he may be choosing to give it quietly as opposed to, as is said in the law, open and notoriously. They have a big decision to make, but I will note again, the team never, ever, ever quit playing for Antonio. And when your record wanes, as the team did over the year, you see teams quit, and this team played hard every down.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they do go to for this head coaching position. It's a crazy carousel right now. Stephen A. Smith is the perfect person. We'll have him on momentarily to talk about this. But,
I think it's 6. I think it's 6 now, isn't it?
That's math. I don't do math.
Okay, yeah. You know what? That's just one of the things I love about you. Yeah. I don't do math either.
I don't do math. Stephen A. is a great person to talk about this with, because obviously we'll be talking to him about Gerard Mayo and what happened with one and done in New England, also about the situation in Dallas right now. And I'm curious if you could help us unpack a little bit before we get to Stephen A. Your thoughts on where Mike McCarthy is contractually right now with Jerry Jones.
It's a great question. And I should say, Suzy, I shouldn't do math on air. So having made that mistake before, I won't again. Great question as to Mike. And look, from the perspective of one who was on the business side of contracts, and from the perspective of one who went to law school, the team negotiated a contract with him, which gives the team the exclusive rights to have him speak to them and only to them for the next roughly a week. Again, I won't do the math and count the number of days, but there's about another week left of exclusivity for the Cowboys. And when you negotiate something like that into a contract, it's your right to say, look, we have the right to keep you from talking to anyone else for the next week or so. And again, it's roughly a week. So from a business perspective, the Cowboys have every right to do what they're doing. From a legal perspective, the Cowboys have every right to do what they're doing. But from a human standpoint, if they have decided that they don't want Mike back, and I don't know that they have, or if they're thinking they might not want him back, and I don't know that they are, then go ahead and let him talk to other people. The problem is, of course, if they haven't decided, or if they know they want him back, by letting him talk to other teams, they may be granting him leverage. If he goes and talks to another team and the team makes him an offer, he now has leverage. And if you're the Cowboys and you're looking at this from a business or a legal perspective, wait, I negotiated this contract so you wouldn't have that leverage. Why should I give you that leverage now? And my answer to that is, do the right thing if that's the right thing to do. But let me just add one last thing on this, Suzy. There's a lot of chitter chatter all the time about, does Jerry want to win? Does he really care about winning? I worked with Jerry and Stephen and Charlotte and Jerry Jr. on League Matters while in the league. They want to win.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I know you've not said that, but when we've talked about this before, I get a lot of feedback. Do they really care about winning? And my answer is yes, 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 they want to win.
Yeah, I can't imagine somebody really questioning that. Yes, he's made strange decisions, not only on waiting on Dak Prescott, waiting on CeeDee Lamb, and now waiting on Mike McCarthy. The deadline, of course, being January 14th, and we tape this on a Tuesday, a week in advance. But it is strange. I think that there's no doubt in my mind, as he's mentioned before on his own radio show, how badly he wants to win one more time. And he talks about his relationship with God, and he asked God to win. Then he said, well, can I have one more, et cetera. But with the Bears expressing interest in Mike McCarthy coming to Chicago to work with Caleb Williams, we've seen this happen across the National Football League, where somebody gets let go and suddenly they're a huge star elsewhere. Saquon Barkley comes to mind right away, and the teams pay the dividends for that. But you're saying do the right thing, and yet it's a business deal.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. You have to balance the fact that, hey, look, we negotiated the right to keep you from talking to anyone else until, as you just noted, it was the 14th. It is a week from today. That required math. Look, we negotiated an exclusivity until the 14th. But if you've already made up your mind, and I'm not suggesting they have, then why preclude him from doing that? And the answer is because you don't want to give him leverage in case you ultimately do wish to negotiate a new contract. But Suze, let me let you in on a little secret. Even when teams aren't supposed to be talking to some players or coaches, they find a way to do it behind the scenes.
Right.
Even when players and coaches aren't supposed to be talking to other teams, they find a way to do it. It's through third parties. It's through agents. Conversations go on even when they're not supposed to or not allowed to go on.
I just would love to have an understanding, and we understand no team is more of a family team than that of the Cowboys and the Joneses, but it has been really head-scratching this year to see Jerry wait up into the last moments repeatedly to make these decisions. And you're left wondering, why is he taking so long on this coaching? We had the questions about whether Belichick would go to the Cowboys. Clearly, he found a home in North Carolina in the college ranks. We've also kind of wondered if McCarthy is a fit with this team, period. Do you think it's a FOMO thing? Do you think he's worried about McCarthy leaving and finding a winning opportunity with the Bears or elsewhere?
I think he may be engaging in something I always advocate people in all businesses do. Asking himself, and do what? Mm-hmm. If he's thinking of moving on from Mike McCarthy, and I don't know that he is, but if he's considering that as an option, you need to ask yourself, and do what? If we choose to move on from Mike, and do what? And if the answer to that question isn't as good or better than the status quo, then what the heck are you doing? And he may be going through that analysis right now.
I understand injuries come into play as well, but...
Yes.
Obviously we've had an injury-prone season. I think I understand more why the Giants are keeping Daboll more than I understand why he would stay with McCarthy.
Interesting. Why?
I feel like Daboll has a different track record. I feel like they've got to reinvent at the quarterback position. I feel like there's more of a fear of Daboll leaving and potentially winning right away. I just don't know that I think I almost don't understand in myriad ways why they think McCarthy is a better option with this young quarterback who really needs the help there.
Well, let me go back to something you just said about the Giants, because you referenced the quarterback situation, and you're absolutely right. They have a problem at the quarterback situation. They need to solve it. And yet they're keeping the GM who did the Daniel Jones contract and let Saquon leave. That puzzles me more than the coaching decision in some regards.
I would leave the coach and I would get a new GM.
I mean, you're saddled with that Jones contract. When you're not saddled entirely, but that's just the equestrian in me coming out and reference saddling. And you let Saquon go, but you're keeping the GM. That's interesting.
Stephen A. is the perfect guest for this. We're going to unpack all of this with him as well. I have to talk to him about Jerry Jones, the actor. I don't know whether he saw Landman or not, but Rich and I never have time to watch TV. Never, right? We're so tired all the time. We've got these 3 kids that are, just milking the life out of us. And we watched a lot of Landman over break and Billy Bob Thornton's show. It's Taylor Sheridan, just incredible. Anyway, we're watching last night. We're so psyched to get an episode in. And our dear friend John Hamm is dying in bed at the end. And I don't want to give too much away because if you haven't seen it, it's truly phenomenal. And Demi Moore says at one point to Billy Bob Thornton, guest of the Rich Eisen show on a frequent basis, Jerry's in there talking to, she's referring to her husband. And we hear this incredible soliloquy on being a family man and running a family business. And there is Jerry Jones, the actor, who I'd never seen him acting before.
Was he good?
When I tell you, he was so phenomenal.
Really?
So lights out great. And what he was really doing was unpacking his own story of how he followed his kids to college, how he got these 2 oil wells in California, how he then got the money to fund the Cowboys, and how he says to John Hamm's character, he reminds him, I did this whole business so I could work with my children. And he wants John's character to do that as well. It was so spectacular. And I thought, Jerry Jones, if he wants to take a break from running the Cowboys, he's got a future in Hollywood. But it really made me think about where he is right now with this team, because he is very aware of his mortality. This story he told was directly in parallel to what he's living with the Cowboys right now. And as we get on one of the greatest Cowboy haters of all time, Stephen A., it really made me think about Jerry's decisions and how this decision is actually far weightier than we even think about it from a football perspective, because he is looking at the rest of his legacy with the team right now, and how he makes the decision with his coaching really affects that.
And I have tremendous respect for how honest he was about that when he was questioned the other day about, are you going to step away from this GM role? And he said, I bought this business to run it.
Yeah.
It's not an investment. It's their family business.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. So we will unpack all of that with Stephen A. ahead, as well as hit the Gerard Mayo situation in New England as well. Another one and done. Mike Vrabel is clearly the prettiest girl at the dance right now. I mean, I've never seen somebody's name come up in more conversations. And it really led me to think, why didn't they just take him last year? Did they set Gerard Mayo up? Did they have the confidence in him? I really thought it was fascinating to watch Robert Kraft take the absolute and full blame for
tremendous
what happened there.
Look,
anybody who knows me at all knows how much I adore. I still call him Mr. Kraft because I grew up with him and have such a huge amount of respect for him. But for him to go out there and say, we made a mistake here and we put him in a bad position. But, it has to make me wonder, was there FOMO there as well? Were they too worried about Gerard Mayo possibly going off and doing well elsewhere? Is that why they kept him?
Well, or had they really made, look, the report was they had made a commitment to him years back that he would be the successor, and they just may have wanted to honor that commitment. And you know what, Suzy, people think there's such ill will between me and the Patriots and all of that, and that's not the case.
Because of the Tuck rule?
Something like that.
Right.
I vaguely recall that.
Yeah.
But I have tremendous respect and appreciation for Robert and Jonathan, and we don't have time to do it now, but at some point, if we ever want, I'll tell you something spectacular Robert did for me during my career.
Go.
Well, there was a situation where Al accused the Patriots of tampering, and I said, Al, they didn't tamper. Our guy called the Patriots. They didn't tamper. And Al just kept on it. He was going to go after them with a tampering claim, and I kept saying, Al, I won't let you file it. They did not tamper. Well, there was a league meeting the next week or so, and to make a long story short, I approached Robert Kraft, and as I did, you could just see him sort of tense up. And I said, I'd like a moment of your time. And I explained to him, I know you didn't tamper. I've told Al you didn't tamper. I'm not going to let Al file any sort of a claim. And you could just see Robert, you could just see him take a breath and appreciate what I said. And then he shared with me some advice that to this day gives me goosebumps, and explained to me that he understood what I was working with and the situation with Al's age. And he just really gave me some tremendous supportiveness for my career and some tremendous advice, and I will always appreciate that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that story. I mean, like I said, I've known him since I was about 14 or 15. His youngest son, Dave, went to the all-boys school to my all-girls school, And he was incredibly supportive of me when I went to Columbia.
Oh, that's terrific.
And I've been so grateful for him being out in front of the anti-Semitic. His Blue Square campaign has been really powerful. I think it took a lot of courage and character to get out there and speak the way he did. You don't really hear that many owners do that. And I thought that took tremendous.
I served on a committee that Jonathan headed up to, the league's digital media committee, and I have the same respect for Jonathan as well.
That said, we go right back to the coaching carousel. We go right back to Mike Vrabel, who makes, as somebody who grew up watching the Patriots and loving the Patriots and watching them win, Vrabel was so.
I'm sorry, my earpiece I just didn't hear any of that. My earpiece must have gone out.
It's like for any what? But Vrabel, he is part of Patriots lore. And we know we have.
You think that's where he'll end up?
100%. I feel like it. God,
Breaking
it's like,
news. You heard it here.
You know how you said there's so much stuff going in the back channels, the agenting. And again, when I was covering baseball, like I was constantly dealing with back channels and, picking Scott Boris's brain and come on, tell me ahead of time and trying to like work out deals to get the info ahead of time. But I just feel like, I wonder if that's a done deal already.
You know what, Suzy? Sometimes I think I'd be not sometimes, all the time, my alternate life. I'd be a spy. I would like you to be on my spy team.
I would be a spy.
We would be a great spy team.
So this would be like your new Lifetime movie would be, it'd be like Spies Like Us, but the redo, like you and me?
You and me.
Yeah.
But we'd really be spies in real life.
Let's just see if I'm right. I feel like this deal is already done. I would like to pretend that I know something that I don't, because I always like to know more than everybody else. But I have a feeling the Vrabel deal is already done. I will look like such an asshole if he goes somewhere else. But I just feel like there's got to be a reason why Mayo's gone. And I think and I just have a feeling that the deal is already set.
One last thing before we welcome our guest. If you are listening, CIA or NSA, we are not really spies.
And as promised, our great friend Stephen A. Smith joins us here on What the Football. Stephen A., Antonio Pierce, the timing is crazy. What are your thoughts on the Raiders, quote unquote, relieving him of his duties?
It's sad. It's unfortunate. Obviously, they thought he was a head coach for the future, very candid, very no nonsense. Obviously, an accomplished football player during his NFL career, but this is about winning in this business. And when you see a plethora of coordinators at various places doing bang-up jobs and making sure to make things happen, and then you feel like your team has been non-competitive in a lot of instances and whatever, you're en route to a 4-13 record, heads are going to roll. We know that. We understand that comes with the business. He understood that. It's unfortunate that they made some of the changes that they made, that they took some of the talent away from him, that he wasn't able to have a quarterback. But in the same breath, you kind of know what you sign up for, and you got to find a way to get it done. And if you don't, results like this end up happening.
You think this is the right move, though?
It depends on the coach that they get in return to succeed him. If you go out there and you get a big-time coach or somebody that's considered a golden boy that has tremendous potential, and that's the route that you go, then you can't say it's the wrong. It's the wrong pick. We'll find out next season and beyond. Remember, you've got some private equity owners in the mix now. You got Tom Brady as a part of the mix now, and they're going to have a say in terms of looking at this team and what it needs to do to move forward and be successful. And you're going to listen to what they bring to the table, and you're going to operate accordingly. And so I don't think we know the answer to that question at this particular moment in time. Time will tell. But usually when these decisions are made and you see a guy getting shortchanged in terms of the irrational decisions that come on the part of some executives, it does raise an eyebrow, makes you a bit suspicious. Houston did it for years. I got to a point where I didn't want them to hire a black coach because you're just hiring him for 1 year and then ultimately to let him go. But then obviously D'Amico Ryans came along and you see the job that he's done, and that's no longer an issue. So again, you strike and it's a hit and miss business.
And, you mentioned that, and then I have to ask you right away about Gerard Mayo. What are your thoughts on the Patriots letting him go after a year?
I certainly didn't like that, but I do appreciate how owner Robert Kraft handled it, putting it on himself, recognizing that he didn't put him in an ideal situation to win, etc. But in the same breath, you would have liked to have seen him have more of a chance in an additional year, particularly with Drake May getting some time under his belt. But I think that when you called the team soft, when you alienated some of the players, I think that's one of the things that Robert Kraft was looking at, and it was a huge turnoff for him. And I also think that when you're succeeding the great Bill Belichick, a 6-time champion as a head coach, a 2-time champion as a coordinator, 8 championships overall, you know how meticulous he is, how he pays rapt attention to detail, etc. When you're succeeding somebody like him, you get measured for everything. You get judged on everything. And unfortunately, as is the case with most super head coaches, usually their successors don't end up measuring up. When you think about the Romeo Crennels, and others that have come from the Belichick tree, who's been nearly as successful as him? The answer is no one. And so when you've been spoiled like that, if you're Robert Kraft and the Kraft family, you're going to be meticulous about really, really defining the job that the person, his successor, ends up doing for you. And if they don't measure up to snuff, you're going to feel the need to make a change quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Yeah, and Steve and Amy and I talked about it at length before. I mean, I've known Mr. Kraft. I still call him Mr. Kraft since I was a kid. And he is no doubt a player's owner. And I think what you said is 100% true, that calling the players soft rubbed them the wrong way. But there's also the double whammy of Mike Vrabel being out there. And he loves Patriot lore. He loves the guys who wear the coats. And do you think this is I think it's done. I mean, I will look like a total asshole if it wasn't, but it seems to me that I would be shocked if Mike Vrabel didn't walk in there with the jacket fairly soon.
I think we all would. I think we all would, because I think that if you're New England, one of the reasons you made this move at this particular moment in time is that you want him. And you certainly don't want him ending up being the head coach of the New York Jets, a division rival. You don't want that. And so I think that definitely plays a role to some degree in Robert Kraft making the decision that he made this quickly. But nevertheless, it still seems a bit unfair to Gerard Mayo, particularly considering how Robert Kraft felt about him. But then, as a black man, you have to take this into consideration. He did give this man an opportunity. There were other directions that he could have gone in when he decided to let go of Bill Belichick. And he handed the reins to a guy that has played for the New England Patriots, that's helped them win in the past, that's an African-American, and obviously he gave them an opportunity. He gave him an opportunity. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, how can you just continues, just pour shade on Robert Kraft? I would have preferred that he kept Gerard Mayo another year and given him an opportunity. But in the same breath, he gave him this opportunity. And he didn't like what he saw. And it's not just about the record. That Robert Kraft is on top of things well enough to see practice habits along with your relationship with players, how you've ingratiated yourself to the players, how you perceive, how they're perceiving you to be moving into the future. You also know that Robert Kraft is the kind of person that will talk to players before making such a decision. And you have to take that into consideration as well when you think about the decision he ultimately ended up making.
You think Mayo gets another chance right away? Where do you think he'll end up? No.
I think he'll get an opportunity to be an assistant coach. But I don't think that you get your first head coaching job, you finish 4-13. And then you turn around, and by the way, blow having the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft because you win a game, the last game of the season. I don't think you turn around from that and land a head coaching job. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. It'll be interesting to see where Antonio ends up. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That team played hard for Antonio every down of every game, no matter what the record was. You referenced something when you were in your initial comments that had me smiling ear to ear. I don't know whether you could see that or not, but you talked about the Raiders and what they do next. And what I shared with Suzy before you joined us was when you let him go, you had best ask yourself the question, and do what? And if the Raiders don't have an answer that's as good or better than the status quo, and this doesn't go just for the Raiders, but every team, the Patriots, any team letting a head coach go, and do what? Ask yourself that question and answer it. And if the answer's not as good or better than what you have, then what are you doing?
Here's why I think that that's not a concern that they have. Because I think that the city of Las Vegas and Raider Nation is excited and intrigued to find out what kind of impact is Tom Brady going to have. there is nothing about him that gives you the impression that he's just somebody that's in it for the money. He's a 7-time Super Bowl champion. He signed a contract to do color commentary for Fox Sports on Sundays a couple of years ago. It was 10 years. It was $375 million. And he still waited to get in some practice sessions and to master the art of what he was doing before he went and decided to do it full time. And that Tom Brady is now in a position as a part owner where he'll be a voice in the room, and he gets an opportunity to evaluate talent. Well, when everything else he's done has been that of a winner.
Yep.
Why would anybody else have say over him when it comes to picking personnel or picking who the next head coach should be? I got to be honest with you. If I'm Mark Davis, I let Tom Brady make the call. I know that might not be in him because he is the son of Al Davis, God rest his soul. But I will tell you, I'd strongly consider deferring to Tom Brady to make the decision about who that next dude is going to be. Because whoever that person is going to be, you're going to support it until there's evidence to contradict your support, just because it's Tom Brady. And that is the kind of thing that I believe the Raiders need right now, because they haven't given you much reason to place your faith in their decision-making as it pertains to a head coach, as it pertains to a quarterback, as it pertains who they elect to let go and where they allow them to depart to. All of these things have been a huge question mark. Josh Jacobs is in New England performing. Okay, Devontae Adams didn't have, what he was supposed to have or whatever. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm sorry, Devontae Adams. But I'm just saying, when you look at Tom Brady, you talk about people that's going to sit back and take a let's-see attitude and give you the benefit of the doubt. I don't know anybody on this planet pertaining to football that would have that luxury at their disposal more so than Tom Brady.
Well, I won't belabor the issue because I shared this with Suzy at some length when we started. I absolutely, positively believe they will, and they should take input from Tom, but I also think they should take input from Richard Seymour, who also owns a piece of this team now. So I would listen to Tom, I would listen to Richard, take their input, and go with it from there.
I think it's insane to think, what's that, Stephen?
I agree with you about Richard Seymour, who, by the way, we're being totally honest, nearly blew his opportunity to be a part owner for the Raiders. I mean, you know that a lot better than me, but I'm telling the truth.
Yep.
He almost blew it. Thank goodness he didn't. Having said all of that, regardless of his credentials, there's only one Tom Brady. There's only one Tom Brady. There are voices, and then there are those whose decision-making you should rely upon, at least initially, until further notice.
I hear
that's what I was saying. I mean, it's all well and good, but if Mark Davis didn't want Tom Brady to sit in the driver's seat, he wouldn't have allowed him to buy in. That's the bottom line. Like, he needed him. He needed the face. He needed the voice. He needed someone to take charge. And at some point, Tom's just got to realize, you can't have both. He's always had it all, but, decide whether you want to win with this team and put your all into it, but you can't do everything.
What you mean you can't do everything? I don't understand what you're saying.
I mean, I think that it's he wants to have the voice of who's going to be the coach. He wants to be able to steer the ship on this, but he's also calling games. It's so complicated. It would almost make
I think we can get over that. I think that when you've given as much to the game as Tom Brady, and we're talking about NFL that prints money, when you have somebody that's able to capitalize financially off of it in a way that no other broadcaster has been able to in history, I think you give him the opportunity to see what he can do before you poo-poo it. Certainly you keep your antennas up. You keep a watchful eye on it. You monitor it accordingly. But this is a 7-time champion that we're talking about. The greatest quarterback the history of the game has ever seen in the eyes of a lot of people, certainly the greatest resume, who has shown a propensity to be dedicated to his craft. And as a broadcaster, as somebody that's entrenched in sports every single day, that understands the responsibility that comes along with the job, I don't think somebody calling football games for 17 weeks a season is incapable of handling the responsibility of being able to look at a franchise and give you an educated voice to the proceedings.
No, I don't think he's
that's
incapable.
something that he can do it. He can do it, and I think he'll do it well.
I think he can do whatever he wants. He's kind of proved that. I'm just saying that there's no doubt in my mind that he didn't come in as a part owner to give his influence and to help make decisions. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
You know?
Oh, yeah, definitely so. He shouldn't. I mean, he should have a voice, and he should be unapologetic about it.
That's right.
He should be able to – Tom Brady should be able to say, I don't think that's going to work. That ain't the way to go. He would know why, and he would be able to articulate why better than anybody in that room. Whatever room that is, in my opinion.
And I don't disagree with either of you on the value that Tom can add and the input and that it will help. I think I'm stronger than either of you on the importance of listening to Richard Seymour as well. I worked with Richard when he was with the team. He is intelligent. He is wise. He is thoughtful. I hear you on Tom. I don't disagree with you on Tom. I'd give Richard a loud voice as well.
I'd give Richard a loud voice, too. I'm simply saying that if I had to choose between who would be a final voice,
Gotcha.
it would be Tom Brady. And the reason I would say that is because we have to take into account your fan base and a level of faith they're looking to conjure up or to ultimately take hold of because they haven't had a reason to have much faith in recent memory. And so when you're selling a product to the public, as you both know, convincing them goes a long way towards your business being fruitful. And I think that's incredibly important. So when Tom Brady says something, it's going to carry far more weight with the public than even somebody as credentialed as Richard Seymour. So the importance is for him to be in the room, to speak his mind, to be able to say what he believes is right, and to have those thoughts and feelings taken into consideration. What I'm saying about Tom Brady is that I'd have no problem if he was the final voice
Gotcha.
on important football matters.
Gotcha. I thank you. I did not thank you for clarification. Understood. Thank you.
I want to ask you about Tyreek Hill and what you think is happening down in Miami. What do you think the conversation is? Obviously, we're hearing, things are copacetic, but they can't be.
They're not. That's a lie. And I didn't like the way he handled it. I thought it was very immature, very irresponsible. And if you're a Miami Dolphin, I don't want to say outright unforgivable because he has been playing hurt for most of this year. And them wanting him to insert himself in the game, in a meaningless game, since the playoffs had been clinched, basically. I'm not going to fault him too much for that, but it clearly was a bad look. When Devontae Campbell did it for the San Francisco 49ers and walked to the locker room in the middle of the third quarter, it was an unforgivable sin. And I think it's important for players to make sure that people understand they're not quitting on their team when they make such a move. It's important to understand that. I also think with Tyreek Hill, there's a level of responsibility and culpability he has to accept. Yes, you wanted your bag. And you got your bag by going to Miami. No crime there. This is football. You have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make the money that he's capable of making. Go for it. Get all you can. Fair enough. The flip side to that, however, is that you departed from the Kansas City Chiefs. You departed from somebody who's arguably considered the greatest quarterback to have ever lived, in Patrick Mahomes. Even that wasn't bad because we all knew you went because of the money. But when you go to Miami, and one of the first things out of your mouth once you arrive is that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be just as good, if not better, than Patrick Mahomes. What nerve? How dare you say such a thing? How dare you even put him in the same sentence as Patrick Mahomes when he has yet to win a playoff game? That's just utterly ridiculous. And then Kansas City goes out and they win 2 Super Bowl back-to-back championships without you. Knowing all of that, and then now you want to leave, and it coincides with you missing the playoffs for the first time in your 9-year career. That's about you owning up to the fact that you made the wrong decision. He doesn't do that. Instead, he points the finger at the organization, and then he throws up this old cliche about having to do what's best for your family. What your family got to do with this? You got your money. You got your bag. Now, that has something to do with your family. But once that is signed, that contract signed on the dotted line, and you know that money's coming in, you've taken care of your family. So since you've taken care of your family by getting that bag, now it's about you. It's not about your family. It's about you. And he's trying to make it about the Dolphins and what they're not. instead of making it about the fact that he should have regretted the decision he made to depart from Kansas City, or at least own up to, damn, I miss Kansas City. I came here because I needed to make that money, but I miss Kansas City. He did neither. Instead, he's pointing the finger at the organization instead of himself, and that's unfortunate.
And there's no doubt there's frustration involved with that, too, that he's had a quarterback who has been hurt a lot. He did have the incident with his car. This has been a rough year for him. It's not what he wanted, but there is a maturity level for these players, and to leave the field in the middle of a game shows a great amount of immaturity.
Well, immaturity as well, and I'm glad you brought up the incident with the police. The police clearly roughed him up a little bit. That was completely unnecessary and uncalled for on their part. However, as a black man, when the cops pull you over and they tell you to roll down your window, you roll down your damn window. When they tell you to get out the vehicle, you get out the vehicle. You don't sit up there and say you on the phone, wait, calm down, and all of this other stuff. They're law enforcement, not you. The first order of business is to make sure that you obey the law. Now, if your life's in danger, that's a different animal altogether. You kept your window rolled up. You got on the phone and called your agent, Drew Rosenhaus, and you swore up and down you did nothing to warrant the police reacting the way that you did. Well, let me tell you one of the first signs to agitate a police officer. If a police officer walks up to you, even before you flagrantly question his authority or ignore his authority, one of the ways to get yourself in trouble with a police officer is by keeping your windows rolled up, because who's to say what's behind those windows? Thank God the police officer didn't pull out his gun, because he didn't know it was Tyreek Hill, and he feared that he could be in danger because you had your window rolled up. The first order of business you're supposed to do when a police officer pulls you over is roll all your windows down and put your hand on the steering wheel. First order of business. You don't even reach into your pocket or your glove compartment until you inform them that's what you're going to do, because you don't know how they can react. And I'm just thankful he didn't get himself shot.
It's a very sad commentary, but it's true. But it is, I think that as we look at his year in as a whole, it definitely plays into, as I said again, a lack of maturity, but understanding that a frustration did build up over the course of the year. And I can't get into his head. I can only opine from my seat as to what I see with him.
Well, let's call it what it is. He's frustrated because he's going to be home watching the playoffs while Kansas City is the number one team in the National Football League, the number one seed in the AFC, the reigning, defending, two-time Super Bowl, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. They've won 3 in the last 4 years, but back-to-back Super Bowl, the reigning back-to-back Super Bowl champions. That's the team he departed. This team led the league in dropped passes last year and still won the Super Bowl. Imagine what they would have done if they had Tyreek Hill. He would have had 3 rings instead of 1. And so he looked at it all wrong. I'm not saying he was wrong to leave to go get his money, but at least put yourself in a position where you could ultimately come back. He didn't do that. And that's what he's doing. He's frustrated because he's sitting at home watching the playoffs while they'll be playing.
I will simply add that it did not surprise me to see Tyreek do what he did when he walked out, simply for this reason, and I'm not suggesting it's right. My experience during my decades in the league, wide receivers are a different breed.
Yeah.
Wide receivers are, I'm trying to look for a diplomatic word to say diva, but I'm just going to say it. That's it. That's perfect. Prima donnas. That was my experience. Whenever there was an issue.
They call it.
Wide receiver.
Wide receivers come on my shows and call themselves that all the time. There's no shame in calling them that, because you're out there running routes You're running routes all day long, okay? And you might get 3 passes thrown in your direction or 4. You want to eat, figuratively speaking. You want the ball. So we understand that. We understand they're justified in feeling that way to some degree. Feeling a certain way is one thing. Handling it as unprofessionally as some of them have in the past. Not most, not all, but some of them. Yeah, that's unacceptable.
But you know who was not a prima donna? Jerry Rice was never, ever, ever a prima donna.
That's true, but let's stop peddling him with roses in this sense. Jerry Rice is universally recognized as the greatest receiver in the history of football. No one ever doubted that. So if you are a wide receiver, you clamor for recognition. There was never any shortage of it for Jerry Rice, not just because of his greatness, but the greatness of the quarterbacks throwing him the football, which would happen to be Joe Montana and Steve Young. And so because we know that to be the reality, that's where you look at him and say, hey, we get it. He was class personified. He was phenomenal. But it was easier for him to be that way because very little scrutiny came in his direction because his greatness was universally appreciated.
I'm going to use this pivot to artfully turn to the Cowboys because, of course, my favorite diva wide receiver is also my daughter's godfather in Michael Irvin. What do you think is happening right now with Mike McCarthy and Jerry as we look at the deadline a week away? We know the Bears are interested in talking to McCarthy, but what do you think is going to be the end of this story in Dallas?
I think that Jerry, my buddy Jerry Jones, he's a man that I respect and I have a lot of love for, genuinely. But I think that he's lost a step. I've watched him give quotes this year, quotes that made no sense. I've watched him say things that were clearly ill-advised. I've watched him explain some of the business decisions that he has made that make no sense. It's just not good business sense. And I've watched him on several occasions get in his own way. Derrick Henry was not what we needed. He would not have been here what he is in Baltimore. You have an opportunity to get a guy that is a monster, a man amongst boys, playing for Tennessee all of these years, who works out in Dallas and lives in Dallas in the offseason, who made it very, very clear he wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy. And on top of all of that is available for $6 to $8 million. And you don't get him? Working right there in your backyard. You wait to sign Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And by waiting, it cost additional $20 to $25 million on your cap because had you signed them at an earlier date, it would have been less, would have gave you ample amount of money, not just to get Derrick Henry, but possibly Saquon Barkley. You didn't do it. And you're trying to explain away that it didn't work for you, that you didn't need it when your running backs was Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. See, these are the kind of things that make no sense. And then you come with Mike McCarthy, and here you are saying, let him talk. We want people that want to be here. Well, he's your head coach. And if you don't want him to go anywhere, you could re-sign him or give him an extension right now. Instead, you're playing games and you're letting him go out on the open market to see. Why would you treat your head coach like that? I'm not saying keep McCarthy. I'm not saying let him go. I'm saying whatever decision you make it. Just make it. What's the hesitation for? You know, why? Because it's going to give you extra days in the headlines? I mean, it makes no sense. And so you look at all of these things from a Jerry Jones, and you're saying, what the hell is going on here? In the end, I think that Mike McCarthy will likely end up staying. I certainly don't think he's the right coach for the Chicago Bears. Dak Prescott has been hurt 31% of the time over the last 4 or 5 years or so that Mike McCarthy has been the head coach. In Dak Prescott's first 4 years in the league, when he made a grand total of $4.9 million, he didn't miss a single game. Ever since McCarthy arrived, and he's gotten about $243.7 million over this span, Dak Prescott has missed 26 games. He's missed 31% of his games. And still in all, you had back-to-back 12-5 seasons prior to this year, which is the worst of Mike McCarthy's career, finishing 7-10. But Dak Prescott got hurt nearly halfway through the season. So I'm looking at all of those things and I'm saying, I don't think he deserves to be fired, but I do think that the Cowboys should have hired Bill Belichick. Mm-hmm. And since they passed up on that opportunity, you might as well keep him. And if you might as well keep him, what's the procrastination about? Just go ahead and keep him.
What would you do if you were the GM down there, if you were sitting next to Jerry?
I'd tell him to retain Mike McCarthy. I tell them to retain them. I said, look, who's better out there? Who's better out there? Unless you feel like you need a young, fresher, vibrant mind. But here's the problem. Offense hasn't been your problem. Kellen Moore was there. You had the second-ranked offense. You let him walk away to the Chargers before he ended up as being offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. Mike McCarthy's here. Quinn was your defensive coordinator. You had an opportunity to have him as your head coach. You could have got rid of McCarthy. You kept McCarthy. You let Quinn go to Washington, and he's got the Commanders in the playoffs, but you're home. Kellen Moore's got the Eagles offense, clicking, and they're in the postseason as the number 2 seed in the NFC. So you just look at some of the decisions that Jerry Jones has made, and it clearly hasn't been his finest year as the president and the GM and the owner for the Dallas Cowboys. There's no denying that.
You have fun trolling. God knows our son Cooper loves your videos more than anything in the world, having fun with that. But you can hear in your voice that there's concern as to where this team is going. And it's funny because you being a guy from New York and with your influence in Philadelphia, we know where your love is in lost. But it just seems to me that someone needs to step in there and I don't know who it is, whether it's Stephen, whether it's a different member of the family, what have you, but to try to explain, like Amy was saying as we started this podcast, people are questioning, does he really want to win? Yes, he does. The guy wants to win. I just think that there's
no question about it. I worked with Jerry and Charlotte and Jerry Jr. and Stephen, and throughout my years in the league when we were there together, they want to win. No one should question that.
Well, I agree with you. They want to win. But you're damn right everybody should question it. Because the results, you haven't won a Super Bowl championship in 29 years. And there have been several times when you've had a roster to compete for a Super Bowl championship. You haven't even been to an NFC championship game in 29 years. Yep. And you have an owner who is also the president, who is also the GM. And I understand he's Jerry Jones. And I understand that's your daddy. Y'all don't have any influence? None? You can't have a conversation with him like, Dad, what are you doing? Dad, I don't think it was wise for you to say that. Dad, could you let somebody else speak in front of that camera instead of you? Take a week off. Let's think about what we're doing here. Come on, Dad. I love you. Dad, what can we do? But it almost seems like the kids are more concerned about themselves and their own individual welfare than that of their papa. Because you're letting him go out there and say it. And I've said this on national television, and I'll say it to you guys right now. I brought up President Joe Biden because I was one of the first that opened my mouth and said I saw slippage. This is a year before, more than a year before the election, and almost a year before his awful debate, the performance June 27th against Donald Trump. And I said, he can't be the president for the next 4 years. I can tell y'all that right now. There's slippage there. Everybody that age ain't slipped like that, but he has. And I said, that's how I felt. And one of the things that people were saying in the aftermath of his poor performance during the debate and ultimately stepping aside as the Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States before that was handed to Vice President Kamala Harris, if his son Bo were alive, none of that stuff would have happened. It wouldn't have been allowed for his father to show up to that debate. It wouldn't have been allowed for people to be exposing him one minute, disguising him the next, or whatever. If anybody could have convinced Pops to step away, to not expose himself to these things, it would have been Bo. Obviously not Hunter. But because Bo had passed away, they couldn't do that. I often bring that up because I'm asking about Stephen and others. Where are y'all when it comes to Jerry Jones? I'm not trying to imply that Jerry Jones is bad and has lost that much of a step compared to President Joe Biden. I'm simply making the point that where's the protection for the dad? Where's the protection where you have the influence to get in his face and say, you're not doing this. I'm not going to let you do this. I'm your son. I'm your daughter. I love you. This is not happening. Where are those people? I don't see it. I don't see any of those things that are going on right now. And that concerns me.
Well, and just to make sure I'm clear that when I said I know that they want to win, that is not mutually inconsistent with what you pointed out, of course, Stephen, which is that irrespective of whether they want to win, they have not won it all in a very long time. I don't know what those conversations are behind the scenes. I don't know what Jerry Jr. or Stephen or Charlotte are saying. But to be clear, I know they want to win, but you are absolutely right. They're not making decisions that are winning in the long run.
Let me just ask.
It's not even about making decisions. It's not stopping him from making certain decisions, like making the decision to talk to the local radio host and sound the way that he sounds, or being in the media after a game and sounding the way he sounds. Nobody standing there with him. You're just gonna leave him standing there, and subject to say anything he wants. And there's nobody. You're his child, and you don't have enough of an impact to say this media's over, this session's over. My dad's not talking anymore. We'll catch y'all tomorrow. No, we're not doing this. No, we're not doing that. I don't care how much he's going to get at you. I don't care how much he's going to get in your face. I don't care how much he might love. He might bark at you or whatever. Listen, my mother, I tell you this story. This is real quick, right? My mother, God rest her soul, she passed away from cancer in 2017. I give you on a less lighter, far more innocuous note. My uncle, in around 2005, 2006, was in the hospital, and he was dying of cancer himself. And my mother came up there. She had on some kind of outfit, ladies, and, she came up there to see her brother or whatever. And I came up there, right? And my mother was in a rush or whatever, and she always prided herself in taking care of her hair or whatever, but this time she was rushing, so she put on some wig or whatever she did. And I walked in the hospital and I said, "Hey, Mom, how are you?" In front of my sister, she said, "Hey, Stephen." I said, "Here, the car service is waiting for you." I said, "Get on the car service, go home, get dressed, get yourself right, and come back. Car service will bring you back." Mm-hmm. My mother's not going to be out here looking like this. My mother was appalled. She was like, "Who do you think you are?" I said, "Your son. That's who I am. And there's a certain way that you don't want to be looking. You're not doing that." Another time she might have had to go to work. She sat up there and she said she went on a cruise. She went on a cruise, ladies. And I know you both can appreciate this. My mother went on a cruise when she was going through her cancer treatment. And she was skipping a chemotherapy session for a week. Guess who called the boat and got the captain on the phone and stopped the boat from leaving until I got there? Mm-hmm. That was me.
Good for you.
You're not going on the cruise.
No.
You can go on another cruise.
You
got
job.
Chemotherapy to get on. This is what you're going to do. My mother was not happy. She was very furious. She was looking forward to it. It cost me a pretty penny because I'm the one who paid for the cruise. I did not care. I am your son. I am not some subordinate or co-worker. I'm your son. I'm going to look out for what's best for you, not what you want. Where are those people at in Jerry Jones' life? That's what I'm saying.
You know what? Putting the Cowboys aside for 1 minute, that you got that boat captain on the phone or that boat company on the phone and you got that boat. Damn.
And he was scared. He was scared
just
too.
What a
Carnival Cruise Lines.
You know
got
what?
him on the phone.
Damn.
Got him on the phone. And
That's
stopped
spectacular.
the boat from docking off. My mother's not going. Don't make me get y'all. Don't make me meet y'all in a different city. Your first place you dock. I'll be there. Get my mother off the boat. And I went and got her.
I mean, I love it.
I love that.
You're not doing that.
I mean, I've always loved you, but I might even love
Never
you a
more
tiny
so
bit
than
more today.
now. Yeah.
Meanwhile, my Nana passed away at 102, and she didn't go a day without red lipstick and her hair done. So I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of discipline. Last question before I leave you, and before Amy leaves you. This is about discipline. This is about family. So it's got to be about the Dallas Cowboys, and it's got to be about Deion Sanders. He says he's staying in Colorado. Do you really believe that if the NFL comes calling, and God, wouldn't he look really, really nice going back to Dallas? But do you believe that he will stay put?
I don't believe him. I've often said, and I've said this to Deion Sanders, who's been a friend for decades. I love him dearly. I love him like a brother. And I've said to him, you're so big time as prime time. We're almost allergic to seeing you in the daytime. That's how big time you are. When we think about you, we think about bright lights because that's what he personifies. That doesn't vibe and coincide with Boulder, Colorado. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. Now, you want to remain as loyal as you possibly can to them. They gave you your shot. You were coaching at an HBCU, Jackson State, and they brought you to the Pac-12. You understand? And now you're in the Big 12. No doubt about it. You owe a debt of gratitude to that university, and you might not want to leave for something else. I wouldn't advise them to leave for Florida State. They had their chance to get him. They passed. Okay. If it's not an SEC team, I thought a Texas A&M should have looked at him. I thought a team like that, Alabama, even though I knew that would never happen. Something like that. Florida, you should look at him. If you decide to make a change, all true. That's SEC. We get that part. But outside of that, it's got to be the NFL. And I don't know how Prime Time could pass up a shot to coach the Dallas Cowboys.
That's what I am saying.
I can't imagine that he would do that. Now, I think that Jerry would be very hesitant, and here's why Jerry wouldn't do it. It's not because of inexperience. It's because Prime Time is every bit as box office as Jerry, if not more so. And so when he speaks, he's going to command a level of tension in front of that microphone that Jerry Jones could has to rival, that would have trouble rivaling. And that's not what Jerry wants. But it would obviously be the right decision for Jerry to make, because when you're talking about primetime coaching the Dallas Cowboys, well, sizzle and headlines make you money. That would be, from a business standpoint, an absolutely brilliant move by Jerry Jones. But what if Deion turns this team around and they get to an NFC championship game and they end up winning the Super Bowl? Then he'd get the credit, not Jerry. And if Jerry has proven anything else, is that credit means a lot to him. That's where he's at. That's what he stands on. And that's very, very problematic for the Dallas Cowboys when you look at their future. If anything, that's the ultimate indictment against Mike McCarthy. Because to coach the Dallas Cowboys in most instances, certainly not with Bill Parcells, certainly not with Jimmy Johnson, but in practically every other situation, Wade Phillips, Jason Garrett, Chan Gailey, others, the perception is that Jerry Jones wants a yes man as a head coach. And we know that ain't going to be primetime. But clearly that was something Mike McCarthy was willing to be. And that ultimately hurts him in the end.
And can't you see Deion walking into Jerry's office and putting his hands on his shoulders, looking him in the face, saying, "You brought me here. Let me take care of the cameras." You're absolutely right.
Yes. Yeah, and Jerry wouldn't want that. But the sad part about it is that I think that that primetime Deion Sanders has a better chance of pulling that off than his own children.
I agree. That's exactly right. Stephen, thank you for your time. You really gave us a lot of it, and we appreciate it every single time you answer my call.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Y'all take care.
Thank
All the
you.
best to y'all. Happy New Year.
To you as well.
Happy New Year to you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Wow, that was an incredible conversation with Stephen A. Smith. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed actually having it. And I want to thank you all for taking in this first edition of 2025 What the Football. Amy, so good to be with you again.
It's nice to be in the same room as you, and wow, that was quite a conversation.
That was something. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. We will see you again right in these chairs next week.